Welcome to Raise Reflection Wednesday. I continue with the discussion of an analytical study of Psalm 1. Now, you may ask, goodness, how long is this going to take me? And if you take good notes, either in the margins of your Bible, in a notebook, or if you're a digital Bible studier like me, I just type up my notes as I go. But I'd suggest if you sit down for 20 minutes at a section, 20 minutes so you have time to read and think and ask some questions and look at the text, 20 minutes at a minimum of 3 times a week. If you can do more than 3 times a week, fine. But at least 20 minutes 3 times a week, you'll be surprised how much you get done over time. Now, if you're used to studying the Bible or reading the Bible from Genesis to Revelation in a year, you're going to think, man, I'm just going so slow and I'm missing everything. And I'm going to say, no, you're going to slow down, see the details, and as you learn the details of just a single chapter, you'll be surprised at how much that information you've learned and soaked in will apply to other texts as you go on. Now, what I want to do with the rest of this session is talk about English translations. Now, on this slide, I've tried to link the Bibles you need when you're going to answer the basic questions of the text. For example, the first basic question, what is the text about? Use a Bible that you're comfortable with. To me, it doesn't matter what type of Bible it is one that you read and can read with understanding. And that's going to allow you to identify the kind of genre or type of literature it is, its topic. You should be able to summarize the text within a couple of sentences, identify major sections and how they're related, and the problems that the text is trying to solve. Now, when you get to number 2, what is the detailed message of the text, then you need to add at least 2 more translations to that which you are comfortable. This will allow you to see some variation amongst the Bible translations regarding words and ideas, which again will point to the claims that a text is making, its arguments, and solutions that it's proposing. Now, if you remember with Psalm 1, it is not making any arguments. It will make claims, but it's going to use images. And so again, 3 translations, and we'll talk about what 3 types. And then with question 3 and 4, you're not going to need to necessarily refer to your translation, but your notes and your prayerful reflection. So when you go to look at the details of a biblical text, you need 3 types of English translations. And if English isn't your primary language, then use one of those. But a free translation is one that tries to understand the biblical text in its original language and then tries to express the ideas there into like English in a style that's contemporary. So it's not a word for word, which is, if you look to the right, is a literal translation. Literal translations try their best to go word for word. 1 Greek word equals 1 English word. Standard versions are versions that try to find that happy medium between free and literal. They'll try to be literal as long as it makes sense to a contemporary English reader. And then they will try to translate the thought in the original into the language of the reader. So I have listed here several translations that are free, not free cost-wise, but free in their approach to translating. 5 standard and 5 literal. If you use the one from each of these, you can get a pretty good grasp at how translators are working with the language, and you don't need to know the original language. I will note that the Revised English Bible, which I love, it's hard to find, but you can find it if you're willing to look hard. Everybody else that I have on this list, you can find at BibleGateway.com and find it in digital form. Again, I don't think it's necessary that you have all of these translations, but that you pick one out of the free, one out of the standard, one out of the literal to begin your study of the text detail. All right, let me give you an example of how the free, the standard, and the literal translations work. On the right-hand column, you'll see the English Standard Version, which is standard, but it tends to be one of the more literal ones of the standard versions. Look at what it does with Psalm 147:10. His delight, that's God's delight, is not in the strength of the horse, nor his pleasure in the legs of a man. Now, think about that for a moment. What does God not want to see the legs of man? So he's trying to say, guys, don't wear shorts. What's he getting at? And of course, they've done this very literal. Legs is the literal, or thighs is the literal. And of course, that's ambiguous enough, even though it's a literal word for word translation, it could be misunderstood. So let's compare that English Standard Version, a very literal translation of 147:10, with the New Revised Standard, which is a standard translation. It's going to be literal and, when necessary, free, and it reads, his delight is not in the strength of the horse, nor his pleasure in the speed of a runner. So the New Revised Standard gives a bit of an interpretation of legs of a man, and it thinks of running. Perhaps it's thought the translators there thought of running because we had the horse before. But then look at what a free translation, like the New Living Translation, what they do. And they take a little different twist to the thought of the legs of a man. And it reads, he takes no pleasure in the strength of a horse or in human might. Those translators are looking at the legs of a man who makes him sturdy, perhaps like a warrior. A horse, again, is strength and can pull a plow or pull a chariot, and the strength of a man can stand to fight or stand his ground. So you can see that that's a little more specific than the literal translation English Standard Version, though the New Revised Standard and the New Living Translation take two different ideas with it. This is why you want to use at least a minimum of 3 English translations, a free one, a standard one, and one that's pretty literal. That way you can kind of capture what the Bible translators see in the original language. Now, I hope that's helped you, but as far as Psalm 1 is concerned, I need you to go back and look at Psalm 1 with the translation you're most comfortable with, and then compare it with at least 2 other translations so that you can see how the wording may be different and whether the differences are substantial enough to alter the claims of the text. Next time I'll go over Psalm 1 with 3 different translations so we can see how this works. Until then, let the words and the message of Psalm 1 soak into your pores.